everybody, I'm Trellis Usher, and you're watching PAX 8 Live.
In less than 3 years, the company that started in America now has over 400 employees across Europe. We've opened offices in Bristol, in Zwolle, and now it's Latvia's turn in the spotlight. Time to show you PAX 8's new Riga office.
Here at PAX 8, I feel like we're not only in IT, but also at people business. And to be honest, it's great to have this new, modern, bright office where you can invite partners right in the middle of downtown, easy accessible to all the partners, so they have easy access to us.
This is a great example of how we can build this community across the world. I've been building businesses for a long time, and I knew we were in a hyper-growth mode. And as we committed to really go internationally, we always felt like Europe would be a fantastic market. And we have bought into this philosophy a long time ago, that the working conditions and the way we work together is very important for how you progress as a company and how you perform as a unified team.
If you think about PAX 8's mission, which is all about enabling and empowering people through the power of technology, that's just the same when it comes to office spaces. That's what PAX 8 offices do. They create the optimum environment for people to really succeed.
I think this is a very strong commitment, yet again, for PAX 8. We invest into our teams and into the regions.
This is a big office. This will also be a regional hub for us in the Baltics, but also internally we will have a place to work together and do meaningful things together.
As you know, for us at PAX 8, helping an MSP to grow their business, be more operationally efficient and manage risk is at the core of what we do as a business. This space is going to create a place for us to create community and innovate together. So as we're helping MSPs to help their customers become more operationally efficient, this is just going to create a great springboard for us to go to the next level here in the Baltic area.
The bad guys are becoming more sophisticated.
Please stay tuned for more information.
I think everybody knows, hey, I might get hacked.
Government officials insist that this is an isolated incident.
There's a lot of risk out there.
This is not a test.
Be prepared.
Stay tuned for further instructions.
It's never too late to start down this journey of cybersecurity.
It's a hard topic and it needs to be addressed.
We will continue to keep you informed as this story unfolds.
What's happening, Matt?
Well, I'm not sure if I heard you, Dom, on that. Did we get your audio on that intro? I don't think so. But,
oh. Well, you know, it's there's some chaos happening at Matt's hotel. They are doing a fire alarm test. Is only a drill, so no need to panic. They did make an announcement beforehand.
I'm actually just so committed to the show that I'm not leaving. Like, if this thing burns down,
yeah.
It's unfortunate.
That's unfortunate. Well, let's see if we can try to get into some news here. We have a busy news day, although not as much of a funeral as we did a couple weeks ago. So the first article, City of Philadelphia discloses data breach after 5 months. So let's talk about it. The City of Philadelphia is investigating data breach after attackers may have gained access to city email accounts containing personal and protected health information. That's a big one. 5 months ago in May. Officials discovered the incident on May 24th following suspicious activity, yada, yada, yada. The investigation found that threat actors may have accessed emails in the compromised email accounts for at least 2 months. However, to date, the investigation determined that between May 26th and July 28th, an unauthorized actor may have gained access to certain city email accounts. It goes on. We're not gonna belabor this entire article, but this one's a tough one. 5 months, right? And I think the thing that bothers me about this is they said they discovered it, right? Much earlier than today. So this is a transparency challenge. I think it's one that we've been working on overcoming, right? We've seen a lot more victims come out and say, hey, something's happening, we don't quite know what. And maybe this city of Philadelphia just hasn't caught up with that, or the procedures aren't there, or there's always the topic of conversation of where they engaged with a higher authority during that time. All right, I think we still have the fire alarm going, so we're gonna jump right into the next article. Hopefully the fire alarm. Yep, that's the fire alarm. The woes of traveling. All right, AmFam, American Family Insurance, confirmed cyber attack is behind its IT outages. It's not a whole funeral, we promise. There's good news coming. Insurance giant American Family Insurance has confirmed it suffered a cyber attack and shut down portions of its IT systems. AmFam is an insurance company focused on commercial and personal property. So, auto insurance, life insurance, casualty, those sorts of things. AmFam Insurance confirmed to Bleeping Computer that they detected unusual activity on their network and shut off IT systems. So perhaps some good isolation activity there, assuming that's part of their incident response plan. The tech teams at AmFam Insurance detected unusual activity in a portion of their network and quickly took precautionary measures to protect data and resources and shut down several business systems. So again, the articles are linked below. This is one of those stutter start sort of incidents, and this is why I kind of brought it to the show. These are some of my least favorite because they came out and said, hey, we're having an issue and we don't know what it is, and it was kind of portrayed as an outage, right? And then they come out a little bit later and say, it's actually an incident. So my question is this a miss on detection, or is this a miss on response, and more so on the sharing of information and public reporting side of that house? And I think that remains yet to be sorted, as does the depth and impact of this particular incident with AmFam. Matt, are you back with us?
I am. I'm back.
No more fire alarm.
Takes requests. Yeah, they do take requests from people with status as opposed for turning off fire alarms. So huzzah! There's that.
Okay.
God bless us. At least if I get to live in a hotel every night, then maybe I have some pull. But no, I agreed. I think one of the challenges we have in both of these stories is this stigmatism and this unwillingness to report. And I think in this second one, as you talk about it, Dom, you really did hit the nail on the head of, is it a failure in detection? Is it a failure in categorization and understanding what the risk was? And maybe is it a failure in their defining of the clipping level of an incident versus an event versus a major breach potentially long term? So I do think you question which part of that's a failure. And when we talk about like CIS or NIST, either way, it's identify, protect, and everybody says they'll protect you. Everybody's going to stop everything, but it's often how well you detect, how well you respond, and how well you recover that come into play there. And I would wager there's room for improvement in each of those. So sorry for my distraction, y'all. It was an unplanned test of the hotel's fire alarm system today. So
it was a planned test. In the pre-show, they did politely say that this is a test. But
right. It'll be coming in a minute. And we're like, I guess we'll see what happens. And here it is. Anyways.
And that was the timing, for sure.
All right, what's our next article? Let's get back in the run of show, pun intended. All right, so this one's a win. I got to come back for the win, Dom. Last week was all Debbie Downer, and this week is actually the other direction, where law enforcement agencies have arrested the suspected developer of Ragnar Locker ransomware gang, tracking the person down in Paris, which I guess the first thing I would say, Dom, is once you make the decision to go against the entire world from a cybersecurity, they got me. They're about to come back on. I'm going to have to go again. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, you continue, Dom.
Yeah, I think, like Matt said, if you expand your available targets too much, then all those available targets come after you, and you start pissing off the wrong intelligence agencies that have significant budget, manpower, and tools to come after you. Correct. That's likely what happened here, right?
And you shouldn't maybe travel to countries that have extradition and
Perhaps.
coordination and cooperation with international criminal organization protections, right? Law enforcement organizations.
Try cockiness, right?
So,
like, they haven't figured out who I am. They can't
is.
do that. And
yeah. And you see it play out over and over again. Silas with one of the early botnets was also in the same boat. He thought nobody'd ever find him, right? He was the one working with the Fed. And same thing with Ragnar. So we do get a win. We actually see a ransomware group.
Yes.
Now, when you think about it, this is actually the operator. So a ransomware operator is the one that writes the software, the one that owns the software. So this is not the affiliate gangs. This isn't that aspect of it. This is actually an arrest of an operator. I say it with a little bit of cynicism in the sense that, yes, it is a win. We are starting to see more and more of Department of Justice and international Interpol coordination and collaboration. But somebody else is just going to rise back up. The code is still there. The capabilities are still there. They may have taken down a C-squared server or something to that effect, or command and control for anybody tracking acronyms for C-squared. Yeah. What else do we have in the news? I'm happy with that one on a positive note, for sure. So what else we got? All right. Dom, this was yours that you brought up, so I would love for you to just tackle it. We'll continue the theme.
Yeah, this one just crossed my desk yesterday. New goal initiatives will include information sharing, ransomware payment, tracking. This is massive news. A global coalition of government cybersecurity leaders will announce effort to boost information sharing about digital threats and take on nefarious cryptocurrency payments when they convene in Washington next week. The Biden administration, yada, yada, yada. There's a part here I'm trying to get to. It might be a little bit further down, but long story short, there's already an agreement between these host nations, or these nations rather, with regards to stopping payments of ransom, which I think is massive,
Right.
and then building an international, larger than it is today, because there's obviously a lot of information sharing amongst the Five Eyes, but a larger international partnership.
Yeah,
we can
50
get the
countries
article
is what
for
they're talking
information
about.
sharing, right? So being able to share that intelligence at the scale of 50 countries is huge, right? We've never had that before, and I think having, I don't know, almost an ISAC, right, of at major scale, will bring some serious power against operators.
You know, what's interesting about this is, like, look back in the 30s with organized crime in the 50s, you know, through 30s through the 60s or so, or 70s. When you think about that in the United States, it was somewhat a United States problem. Right? If you think the Italian mafia might have been operating, and multiple mafias may have been operating, but they were mainly operating here and extracting cash from here. When you think about today, and if you look back to that time, we solved it with RICO. We solved it by getting a bunch of states together like this and starting to share information and having conversations and creating the federal RICO statutes and things that are necessary to take down these corrupt and criminal organizations. But the same thing is playing out now internationally from a cyber criminal perspective. Right. And so I do like that we're starting to see more and more of this information sharing collaboration to try to defund it. And if you follow some slides that I've been doing lately, right, the largest economy in the world is the United States. We grow around 2-point-something% in GDP per year. Right. Second would be China. They grow at about 5.x% per annum in GDP growth. And then the third is cybercrime. And cybercrime is growing at 15% per annum growth. And where's that money coming from? The United States, China, all the different countries that are being impacted by this are losing and hemorrhaging cash. And I think that's one of the good things is, well, how do you stop drug cartels? How do you stop those things? You kill funding. You kill the ability for those funds to make it back to their illicit purposes, right? And I think that's what we're starting to see
Just
here.
dive in on stopping ransom payments, because I've seen arguments against this, right?
Sure.
And I don't agree with any arguments against this, like, at all, for the record. I don't think we should be making ransom payments. That is paying the mafia boy to protect your bread shop, right? Like, that is enabling the continuance of. So I think if a law passed that said it is a federal crime to pay a ransomware ransom, right, it will hurt really bad for about 6 months, right? There will be a lot of backlash. There will be a lot of threat actors trying to get super malicious and grotesque to try to get that law reversed. But I think if we survive it, you've now choked the coin purse, right? They're not receiving money anymore, and it stops. So I think if we were to stop ransomware payments at a national level and in cooperation with other countries, a lot of this problem goes away because financial incentive all but disappears. Save for some of the people that will pay it anyways, and then we'll deal with that.
And I agree with you too. Even saying that, I agree with you. While that law, had it been in place in 2019, would have probably cost us another $1 million, in the sense that I would not have been able to go get the forensics necessary to prove that the company that I ended up suing for a lawsuit right, get the money out of that indemnification policy. I wouldn't have been able to pay the ransom to get the forensics I needed. And it would have had to have just been well, but we think you did bad things. And so it would have been, and I think that's one thing not to miss when making those statements, that there is going to be real economic impact and real death by that decision for companies, right? And I don't mean humans, but I do mean entities and companies. And so I don't want to say it's so lax, but I will agree with you that if I'm looking at a greater good decision, Dom, I would agree we're probably better off not allowing payments. It will hurt. It would mean the demise of many people's futures, but that is unfortunately already there for them, regardless of this statement. So I think we've beat the news to death. We've got some good news. We've got some bad news.
Got
we have one more to
news
wrap
article.
up, because this one's shocking to me. So let's pop it real quick. We won't spend much time on it. But there was a Roundcube 0 day, and I actually said, well, who cares? Nobody uses Roundcube. Yes, the European government entities do, and think tanks. So apparently, yes, Roundcube is still used. Dom, didn't you have similar thoughts when you saw this too? You're like, wait, what? And it's just an XSS, which means
blown away.
It's an interesting. It's not. It doesn't have an. It has a very interesting attack surface that I have to have for being able to do cross-site scripting. Anyways, but yeah, go ahead, continue.
No, I mean, you summed it up. I was blown away to see Roundcube used in any significant fashion. I played with it, back when I had IMAP email addresses and stuff. But
yeah, well, and funny news, it came up for me.
Article, right?
Yeah, that's it. The funny news is Roundcube did come up for me in my PNPT, and I can actually talk about this now because they've changed the test. But I did have to pwn a Roundcube server as the external mail server to pivot to an inside server. I didn't get the benefit of being able to load some arbitrary JavaScript that allowed me to run it. I actually had to pwn the Redcube accounts themselves. But still, it does create where if you run this, it can make that server become whatever code you're wanting it to run based on just a crafted email that you send, which is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So it didn't even need a user interaction. But I really
commercial
just
products.
not using commercial products. Exactly. That's kind of my point. All right, cool. That's awesome. So we've got an awesome segment coming for us from Robin Harris. And when we come back, please stay tuned because I'm actually going to be doing a live hacking demo of a token harvesting session.
Let's roll Robin.
Now, many businesses are still working remote, or they work hybrid, or because most of their operations are in the cloud, they might not pay as much attention to physical security as they used to. So here's a news flash. Part of the ISO 27001 2022 version is enhancing that control. 7.4, physical security monitoring. They have introduced a requirement to monitor the premises continuously in and out of normal business hours for unauthorized access. Isn't that interesting? Continuous monitoring during business hours and outside of business hours for unauthorized access. Now let's think about a couple of things. There's something called juice jacking, where the bad guys can put something inside a USB plug. You know, where we charge our charging stations and we think I'm just plugging something in. They can hijack those. So I don't use, at the airport, I'm not using that. At the hotel, I'm not using that. Public place, oh no. Don't use people's free stuff like that, right? But imagine that you're not paying attention to physical access in your business. And imagine that you have maybe like cleaning staff that was outsourced. And maybe there's somebody clever that comes in and all they have to do, they can go into all the offices and all they have to do is juice jack one of those types of plugs. Yeah, so you're coming into work, doing what you normally do. Oh, I need to charge my phone, blah, blah, blah. You plug it in and now they got you. We really, really, really have to think about 24/7 security, even physical security. And another thing, it feels rude when somebody's coming in the door and we're all supposed to badge in, right? We badge in. It can feel a little rude when you don't let the person tailgate and come in. I'm going to give you permission to be a little rude. Be a little rude and say, oh, I'll hold the door for you. You need to badge in. Let them badge in and then let them come through the door. I know about 2 incidents personally, this is weird, where a person was let in that should not have been let in, and they had violent intent. So a person's let go. You don't know who's been let go, and you see their face all the time, and you know whatever, and they might be like, oh, I forgot my badge. Can you let me in? It's like, well, no, but I'll escort you up to the office where you can get a temporary badge. And they're like, oh, never mind, whatever. But I know that feels icky. It feels icky, but you could literally be protecting yourself and coworkers from an event that is totally unnecessary. One of the tests we used to do, we used to sit downstairs with one of the companies I worked, and we used to watch people come in to see who was tailgating. Just taking note. And really, that is a simple thing that it literally can protect not just the company, not just data, but I'm talking about protecting people's lives. So I give you permission to be a little rude and say, oh, I'll hold the door for you. Go ahead, badge in.
Dom and I have made a root decision that this is probably going to keep happening. So y'all are just going to hear my fire alarm because I want to demonstrate this for you. So let's talk about what this attack is. Dom, what is an AITM? What does that stand for? Let's get our little code up here.
Adversary in the middle. So formerly known as man in the middle if you've studied traditional security.
So we're going to demonstrate an AITM attack. And what I have set up is some DigitalOcean infrastructure. I've got a Kali box. Well, actually, it's not. It's just an Ubuntu box. But I'm running EvilGenix 3. And we're going to demonstrate that for you. If you've ever heard of a token session theft, what is that, Dom? What does it mean when I steal your session token?
So after you log in to just about anything, by the way, but particularly more modern apps like Microsoft, you're going to get a token, which is a signed JSON web token. Not going to belabor what those are. You can Google it. Or JWT, which is basically a signed piece of information that says this is Matt and he signed in using this methods. He has, this association, some other information. He's good to go. If you can steal that, and there are no other protections besides thou shalt have a token that is valid and unexpired,
right?
That's a problem. That token is a secret, effectively, an ephemeral secret, but a secret.
Well, let's go ahead and show this attack and how it happens. We're going to demonstrate somebody that doesn't have a FIDO token to protect themselves for this token theft and somebody that does. So our victim is going to be Nick, and he's going to join us. But let's go ahead and kick over to my box. So I've got my Kali box set up, or my Ubuntu box set up here, and I'm going to run EvilGenix. Now, what this is, what's so interesting about this is how easy this is. I'm just going to run this infrastructure. Now, you got to have some requisite background knowledge and things that you're going to do. But ultimately, I'm going to generate a link. And if you notice down here, it says Microsoft 365. And that's going to allow me to say, let's say lure get URL lures get URL 0. And so we're going to have this mysterious link, right? AITM.howiwouldhackyou.com. But yes, Dom and I do own howiwouldhackyou.com, and Microsoft's now starting to get wise to this one, so it causes some challenges. But I'm going to go ahead and send this link in a phishing email to my victim. So let's go ahead and cut over to my victim real quick, and we'll see that he's received this, and he's now going to start going ahead and connecting into this. So let's switch over to Nick's screen for me, and go ahead and share your screen, Nick, for my victim.
Guys.
You've already clicked on it. So let's go ahead and sign in. Let's go through this action. So this user's received a Clippy icon or a free fishies that says, please get your free pet fish. He's clicked on the fish link. Let's go ahead and see what he sees. Well, look, in this, it just looks like a Microsoft sign-in, right? He's just been prompted with a sign-in from this link. So let's go ahead and sign in for me, please. I'm not seeing your sign-in, but that's okay. There we go. Sweet.
We're all excellent typers until someone's watching.
Isn't that the truth? And any of you engineers out there watching right now, you know you're just as bad at this too when you get watched. We've all done it. oh, wait, we have to go through MFA because he's a good user, right? So he's got this MFA token of 74 needing to be entered. So he's going to go ahead and do his thing on the background and do his MFA. And once he's through the MFA, he's going to go ahead and move on with his day and say, no, you know what? He's a good guy. He's not going to keep signed in. He cares about his cybersecurity. And so what's interesting is if we notice he's going to be there. Let's go back to what the threat actor sees, though. Let's come back to my screen. What do we see here? We have Matt Lee at purpletenant.com, which is the user he typed in. We have the game 2023, 2 exclamation points. So he's signed in with that. They're even so nice as to show me that he has an MFA method that is phone notification that we've captured in this particular token. But the most important line on this is all authorization tokens intercepted. Money. So we can now go into sessions, and we should see a session number 15. And we're going to say sessions 15. And you're like, okay, cool. So what do we have here? Well, we obviously have the username and password. But if I wanted to go type that in, that's really loud. You're going to see my IP address. I'll have to pass conditional access things that are there. That's extremely loud. And so instead, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to capture this token, if I'm smart enough with my scroll bar, which I'm not. So this should be fun. Somebody signed in and moved my screen on me. Almost. Okay. So we're going to grab this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring this into the attacker's infrastructure that they're going to use. And in this case, what I'm using to do this attack is actually a Microsoft WVD. Well, why, Matt? Why would you say that's a good idea? Well, it's because that WVD environment is actually inside Azure. And so if there are other things that are being looked at from a continuous evaluation, they perhaps might get past it, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that I'm not signed in, right? So login.microsoft, outlook.office 365, I'm not signed in. And so I'm going to come down into this little handy-dandy cookie editor, which, by the way, don't go try to find cookie editors yourself. If you're actually trying to go down this path, there's a lot of good places to get that information. But there's a lot of cookie editors that are also stealing your cookies. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. We're going to say import. And nothing really looks like anything's happened, but it does say cookies were imported. So let's try going to Outlook again. What happens now? Oh, wait a minute. I'm now that victim. As this threat actor, I've been able to intercept their token and replay that token in this session, right? So you are seeing that I'm signed in. And I think Steve Weed, one of my producers, asked me this beforehand. He says, Matt, what could they actually do from there? Everything that user can do, right? And if you notice, if we looked at Nick's screen, he's still signed in too. He's able to proxy through and still function on that same session token, and my traffic will get intermixed with his. And what's really interesting is if you take this attack surface further, a friend of mine just released this, but if you look up Graph Runner is a new, by Daft Hack from Black Hills Information Sec, or Bo Bullock and Steve Brosh, RevShell, made a post-exploitation toolkit that allows me to search and export mail with that token, search and export SharePoint and OneDrive files, deploy malicious applications, discover misconfigured mailboxes, clone security groups, find groups, leverage GUIs, all kinds of things that allow me to do things to attack Microsoft Graph without having to do it through the UI like we're seeing here. But let's go back and show this attacker one more time. Let me exit this full screen, and I'm going to go back one more time. And
I want to point out a couple things. Is one, Nick had push notification MFA with number matching and additional sign-in context, right? He didn't notice anything there. Now, just from a defense perspective, let's think about that. With additional context, the chances of you having stood up your EvilGenix server in a close enough geo to Nick where that additional context would not have been spotted is slim, except for the fact that our users aren't looking at additional context, let's be honest. But that's something we could train people about, right? I talk about this all the time. If you turn on additional context and they're signing on from Denver, make sure you tell them that it needs to say Denver, right, when they sign on. And get their MFA. So there are defenses against this, but let it be noted that you have essentially skipped username, password, and MFA by owning that token.
Great call out. And Dom, you did receive my malicious link as well, right? So let's go ahead and look at our Microsoft email that we got, and let's go ahead and sign in from our Microsoft sign-in link. Yeah. All right. Share it. So there's Microsoft. That's Clippy, because we want to bring back Clippy and make it super legit and real.
I wanted to point out one more thing. This is a valid certificate. There's no certificate warning, none of that. It's worth pointing out.
And actually, let's talk about that real quick. While Dom's signing in, he's going to sign in with a FIDO token instead. While Dom's signing in, I actually stood up all that encryption with automated processes. I didn't have to do anything. It was already structured that way. And so it is pretty interesting. So if you notice, Dom isn't able to sign in. It's saying, hey, Dom, what's it telling you right there?
It says this security key doesn't look familiar. And there's another
Right.
piece of context here that's important. Well, there's two. So FIDO and WebAuthn match based on the domain name that you registered that credential with. So it's mutual authentication based on that piece of information. So that's point one, right? The key cannot find a credential for login.ms, etc. Now, interesting thing is in EvilGenix 3, and this was not true in EvilGenix 2. In EvilGenix 3, they have intercepted a redirect because typically, if you sign on with FIDO with your account right now, you'll notice you go to a different domain. EvilGenix has found a way to intercept that. That's genius. So they're trying to get closer to grabbing that FIDO, but right now I'm going to call IT and say, hey, my FIDO key's broken, right? Because that's what I'm seeing. I cannot sign in with the FIDO key that worked when I signed in a minute ago. So yeah, this is not going to let me in. And just for the sake of proof, if you will, let's just sign into the portal, right? The legitimate portal.office.com.
You're not going through the mat attack in the middle? That's unfortunate.
That is unfortunate, yeah.
But he should now be able to sign in, and it does match.
I have to abort. I apologize. Mistakes have been made. Bear with me.
No worries. It's okay. So let's
That's
switch
not
back
the
over
background
to.
I was expecting to see.
Yeah, let's switch back over to the attacker. Oh, you're good. Okay.
We're good.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We can show him.
Do it
While Dom's doing that, Dom's going to sign in with a security key. The law of live demos, folks.
7+1 Labs.
Send the right cred.
Bar.
Yep.
Well, you should have trust me that it would work.
But the point is, a FIDO token fails, and we already saw it failed.
Edge is
In
going
fact, if we switch back to my screen, I'll show you why it failed. So what it's doing over here is instead of actually sending or tying in, it's actually getting a username that is the cryptographic representation of that single push Dom made, which isn't very useful for me, right? It's not replayable in that sense. So the point is, and what I'm trying to make, we can also just cut back to a regular camera now. The point we're trying to make is this type of harvesting to the user on the end didn't see anything. In fact, I'd like to bring in our security folks and Dom, and let's kind of come back to have a conversation about what we just witnessed here. So let's bring everybody in. Dom, you'll have to kill your screen sharing there. Dom is now represented by his webpage. It's okay. So we've got Rob and we've got Nick back in, and thank you for being my willing victim of this, Nick. I appreciate you. We had to do a lot of infrastructure setup to make this possible and still protected from the world being a challenge. But what do you think about this, guys? Y'all are in security. You've probably known these demos before, but tell me your thoughts on token harvesting and what we just witnessed there.
So I guess in my opinion, like a lot of the people who are watching, they're like, oh, I would never fall for that kind of thing, right? Or, you know, any sane person would never fall for that kind of thing. But it's probably just as effective as pretty much any phishing email that is successful. And people fall for phishing emails quite often. So this is, you know, it's a pretty dangerous activity. Like when phishing emails first became an issue, we had MFA pop up, you know, and that helped solve some things. But as you saw, even with MFA, there was still able to succeed in the attack. I don't know. It's sounds like it's a pretty dangerous thing to me.
Yeah, and those are by default, Dom. How long are tokens valid in Microsoft by default if you don't change anything?
What is it? 30 days, right? 90 days.
I think it's 90. I think it's 90, actually. Yeah, it's 90 days. So if you haven't made changes, I can take that. And so we talk about initial access. What might I do once I receive that token? I could do all the things we talked about, harvest for business email compromises, try to see if you store any creds in your files. There's all kinds of things I'm going to search through. But the other side of it is for 90 days, I can sell you. For 90 days, I can sell you to someone else, right? I can help you be the entry point for getting a password reset for Caesars, or, right? I can sell that token and identity. And, you know, I've been demonstrating EvilGenix attack methods now for about 4.5, 5 years. And they've still maintained principally the same. What are some of the things you can do to protect yourself? Dom hit on one of them, right? In my opinion, there's training. Nick, you said the same thing. Like, I'm never going to fall for it. Well, then you should live that life and mentality of trying to not fall for it. And you should live that I need to see and try. And if somebody sends me free fishes, maybe I don't click on the fishes. If someone says it's Microsoft, Maybe we look and do a little validation of Microsoft on that, right? To that point. Oh,
Could be
Microsoft.
trustworthy.
Robert, what's your thoughts, man? Tell me what you're thinking after seeing this.
Well, it's behavior management, really, right? So it's like it's on our end we're trying to just have this cadence of like not all your work business emails are going to be legit emails. It will be purposefully, you know, not malicious, but it's going to be purposely from me or from our team, just so that you know that, hey, this looks like a pretty good legit Microsoft email, but I haven't clicked on links, but this is telling me that I have. What do I got to do that? And so if they click on it nonetheless, or they click on that email nonetheless, they have to know, like, okay, at least they felt better that a security awareness training is going to be pushed their way, because it's a legit, or it's a fish from us. And they're not automatically just like trusting what they're seeing across their inbox every single day. Especially if they're not like.
You're speaking from a time of people working in an office where they have that support structure. Let's focus on what we wanted to focus on today, which is this working from home and how that changes things, right? And how that makes this even larger a risk. Dom, you had a topic you kind of wanted to kick into about why is this so different working from home? Because we used to be in this walled garden model, and yet we live differently today, don't we?
Yeah, walled garden, castle moat, it went by a million different names, but the general idea of I have a whole bunch of desktops in some sort of brick and mortar box somewhere in the world, and they're all connected via Ethernet, behind some sort of firewall, which, by the way, even looking at myself, if I'm being honest, we weren't using half of what that firewall could do. We weren't doing SSL inspection, etc. But that firewall was at least providing some illusion of security, and I controlled everything that happened on that network. And that's just not true anymore. There is no good graphic we could draw to represent consistently where users are, because users are where they want to be.
Yeah, they're working from home. They're working from Starbucks. They're working from all kinds of places. And, Dom, you kind of talk about this
Marriott,
walled garden.
fire alarms.
Yeah, Marriott with fire alarms and such that are going off. Yes, 100%. But, we talk about this walled garden, even though that was in itself probably inherently broken, this belief that I could have juicy, soft stuff in the middle, hard, protective exterior. Like in the old days, that ended when the cannon got invented. And I think, right, because you now besiege a city and take out its walls. And so we're in that same breath, I think, today with how security is functional. We used to think, the soft, juicy stuff doesn't need protecting. And now I follow Phyllis Lee's statement, which really is your user's network ends where the fingertips land. And that means in different device types. We've seen this with multiple compromises, right? Even major corporations. You have a major password vendor that had, a compromise because of a home user using his home desktop with a VPN back to the network and running a Plex server at the end of the day. And it was out of date. It was easy to compromise. And so it became a very fast target for that. So one of the things, Nicholas, you had brought this up and you got pretty passionate about it. Like, what about that working from Starbucks? What are some of the risks and thoughts of problems that can come from working at Starbucks? I don't mean working for Starbucks as like a side game. I mean working from the actual restaurant, just to make sure I'm clarifying.
So by Starbucks, this applies for any public like Wi-Fi access, right? Inherently, you shouldn't trust public Wi-Fi networks. Like, you may need it for internet and stuff like that, but it should not be trusted. There's a load of different things that you can do. There's sniffing. There's a bunch of different attacks that can be done. People can
in the middle attacks in their own right.
Yeah, man, in the middle attacks. What you did was done over the internet, but originally they were very common over networks.
100%.
So yeah, there's a lot of those attacks that can occur. And another thing that even simple stuff like leaving your computer unlocked. Like
nobody ever does that.
Walking away. Oh yeah.
Nobody ever does that.
Never.
In fact, if anybody's followed, I don't know if we have any graphics for this, but if anybody's followed, I have been on a campaign. Dom's been on a campaign this year where we're doing #LockItUp2023. And anytime you find an unlocked laptop, I want you to post it on LinkedIn. Make sure it's OPSEC safe. To make sure it doesn't have anything on the screen that you're going to get them in trouble for. Take a blurry picture, and then post it up and just show it. How many do you think I've found this year, Nick? How many do you think I've found this year of unlocked laptops?
7.
I'm at 26. I have found 26 laptops unlocked at every conference I go to, even the most secure ones. In fact, I did a talk at GurCon this year in Michigan. That's as nerdy of a nerd conference as you can ever get from a cybersecurity perspective. And we found a couple of open laptops. I put them up on the screen, and the title of the slide was, "And You Suck Too." And I showed them their own computers they had left open and left unlocked. So yeah, you think about that. What are those things they can get from that, Dom or Rob? What's something I could get if I have an unlocked laptop? Let's play that game.
Well, Nick actually unlocked his laptop on purpose in front of me, and he left the room, went to the bathroom, and I kind of just started trying to mess with him, and possibly get a Hasselhoff on his browser.
Perhaps you've been off.
It's just like very immature Rob, whatever.
Yeah.
But he did it purposefully, and I got a jump scare, and he heard my 12-year-old shriek as his jump scare came up on his laptop.
We call that counterintelligence.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, right. I put a simple script of Peter.
Elaborate.
It's
No, I want to hear the script. How did you do it?
Yeah, how did that happen?
You tell me how you did it.
Go, man.
If the mouse was moved, or if the mouse was moved, or if the anything was pressed on the keyboard, it would trigger the script, and it will replace my background picture with a picture of a screaming person, and it'll play a really loud screaming noise. Because I knew these guys were like,
it's coming.
All right, bonus points. What is that called if you did that in cybersecurity? What's that in bonus points? What do you call that device he just created right there for somebody?
Asking me?
Yeah, what do you call it? If somebody sets up, that's a honeypot. Yeah, it's a honeypot. You just honeypotted Rob for counterintelligence. You now know Rob will off you if you leave your computer unlocked. So you've identified those assets. No, sorry, Rob, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were saying some good stuff about I could run bash bunnies, all kinds of stuff I can do if I find an unlocked laptop, right?
Absolutely, and then you can have a malicious USB cable and have it next to them or whatever. It's because now they want to charge a device into that laptop, and hey, it might run like a background script that will ultimately pop.
Well, and I'll tell him myself, right? Because when we get into this, what he's referencing is like OMG cables or bash bunnies or rubber duckies. There's several terms for them, but ultimately what they are is an HID, and I'm going to define that. It's a human interface device, right? And so they become a keyboard, and what they do is they hit real quick start, Windows key run, type in command PowerShell NOP, which means no profile dash run really bad crap. Right. And so what these things do is when you're unlocked in the user context, I now can run anything in your user context with a keyboard without your anti-malware looking at it potentially. Right. I have methodologies to inject a AMSI bypass or a anti-malware service, something. Somebody correct me on that. I probably don't get the points on that one, but AMSI. But an AMSI bypass to take out the anti-malware service. I can do things to undermine your security tools. I could write a script that I could type at 10,000 words per minute, right? And with a bash bunny that can then do all the things I need to do to enumerate and hopefully avoid detection and hopefully find myself with a foothold in your user context, or even better, luckily, hopefully you're a local admin and then I have God mode and I can do anything in the world. And so you get into this place where I could walk up with a bash bunny and instantly go ahead and get access to that machine. And I'll tell on myself because I actually made you guys lose it a little bit, because I accidentally ran one of my bash bunny scripts against my local machine instead of my virtual machine that I thought the bash bunny was attached to. And it was in my PowerShell history that you guys found when investigating another attack, right? And you're like, oh God, this looks terrible. But it was really me.
Whoopsie daisy.
So that's the first piece. The other piece is egress of data. thing you are and have access to, if I can get in without even trying to escalate my user access, I can steal session tokens. You just saw me do it in the middle, but guess what? Secret. If you've ever signed into Azure with a credential, it's stored in the .azure part of your user profile. If you've signed in with certain other applications, it's stored in plain text as a cookie. And if I can get access to your machine, then I can take that cookie and go be used somewhere else like I just demonstrated, right? And so there's a huge host of those things. And Nicholas, I think to your initial point of why we've talked about this working from remote places, it's about operational security and awareness, right? When you think about it as you know, the Dom of the world working at Starbucks, I have no doubt Dom is aware of his operational surroundings and locking his machine before he walks away just to make sure that nobody has access, and certainly doesn't just see what's on your screen. You could have, you know, actual breaches you create by somebody reading somebody else's health information from there.
That's what I've seen. I've seen CPAs sitting at Starbucks doing tax returns on the little couch, and so they didn't even leave the computer alone. I could just read off the social security number and the name and the date of birth, and you know, like, it was ridiculous.
And these aren't as big of a concern when you're worried about Rob seeing my data working in an office, right? I don't have the same level of concern. We both work for the same organization. There's certainly some failures in, you know, privilege of information and POLP, sure, but not as impactful as Dom reading my social on my CPA's laptop and using it against me, right? Those are failures of stewardship of data, which goes right along with this whole, you know, national cybersecurity strategy and you know, Jen Easterly's talk of we need to make the stewards of our data responsible for our data. And so, you know, anyways, beating this to death. What else do we have to consider about working at home, Rob? Like, you had another example of something we wanted to talk about for this. What was it?
Can you give me a hint? Because I forget
I can.
now.
No, you're good. You had brought up to me, well, you brought this up, and this is why I brought it up. You had brought up to me, what about when somebody leaves a laptop in a car and it's stolen? Right? You said you've dealt with this with several incidents already this year. What are the thoughts on that? Like, let's talk about the theft and loss of hardware and what some of those things we can do to protect ourselves are. So what's the problem first?
Well, the problem is that machine has that, you know, that internal data that someone would probably want, right? To be able to have access to.
And those sweet juicy tokens I just told you about, and those sweet access tokens and primary refresh tokens, all the juiciness that we want. Yeah.
So they got to know who to call, like ultimately have some way to just like report it up and report it to us, and we can go on our end and, you know, ultimately MDM wipe it, and you know, that magic dust is, you know.
Well, first you used an acronym, so define MDM.
Mobile device management.
Winning. I get your point today.
Yes.
Yep, you get a point, so it's awesome. So MDM, but you said you could remote wipe it, which means I can send a command to a device that says, if you ever see the glorious internet and inner tubes again, go ahead and delete yourself, right? That's essentially what you're saying, is clear the data off of this device so it's no longer accessible.
Correct. So we will ultimately, you know, revoke sessions and have the user change passwords, all that stuff as well, just because that's in the, you know, that's on a run.
Good hygiene.
But, you know, we'll also, exactly.
Well, let's spin back on revoke sessions, because a lot of people miss revoking sessions. So forcing a user to reset their password does not revoke those tokens are still good. So if you do not revoke, so what does revoking sessions do in the space of tokens?
Yeah, I can answer that. When I revoke a session token, it's no longer valid. And it tells the receiving entity at the identity provider that it's gone. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Rob.
At 30 months, it starts at 0 again at that point, unless they you know, off back in the way they should, right? Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. And Dom, you hit it on the head, though, because what people don't realize is those session tokens, when I talked about, what is a session token? You just got to watch it. I just stole a session token. That token is valid for 90 days or whatever the context of that token is, depending on the conditional access policies, right? And I can seal it. Well, there's tokens written on disk. There's tokens written in registry. There's tokens that are in your cookies, in your browser history. There's tokens that are all valid that are stored on that disk that are accessible. Now, some aren't, right? Some tokens are stored in the TPM or the trusted platform module. Those aren't as easy to part out, right? Those I have to actually do some other abuse to get. But the ones like the session token of that laptop, meaning if that laptop was to be compromised, let's say this threat actor actually took something they already had a credential for, they now would already have the primary refresh token, or PRT, stored in that laptop that allows them to be that victim they took it from, just like I demonstrated with my cookie editor, right? And so those are the reasons that you kill tokens, Dom. I kind of got you off your tangent there, but yeah, that's a good point to lean into. You said you had something else you wanted to dig into as well, Dom. If not, we'll continue.
Yeah, so this goes back to working at home, right? Your smart lemon peeler or your smart fridge or whatever, they are woefully. So I have a lot of smart things in my house. Like, I'm a nerd. Don't get me wrong. They're on their own network. They don't get to see the other network. The other network doesn't get to see them, and they get to do their thing on the internet. And I take other measures, like there's no cameras in the house. They're all outside the house, right? But those devices can and have been used as proxies, effectively, to get into your network and start hunting down your work machines. A story came out a few weeks ago of the cheap off-brand Android set-top boxes you could buy on Amazon. Most of them come pre-infected with malware that will survive a reflash, right? It's a rootkit. So it is immediately, they found, you plug it in, you get it on the network, and it immediately beacons to some sort of C2 something somewhere. That's an extremely dangerous device that you might have on your network. So my advice would be, do you really need the dishwasher to have Wi-Fi? But if you really do, put it on a separate network.
And I think that'd be my advice to add to this too, right, Dom? Which is, and Rob, you go next after this. So what I would also add is isolation of assets, right? When you start getting into something that only needs to talk to the internet, it needs to be in an isolation from the other assets. And so I go a step further on my IoT network that I define granular access rules of this device only has internet. It cannot talk to other members in its network. It is not going to be allowed to do that in some ways. And so you can start doing that at the wireless network level. You can start doing that at the port level. You can do individual VLANs. You can do private VLANs. You can do all kinds of things. But if you're at home and you're a basic user, I'll make this simple. Here's an easy way to do this at home. Most routers, home routers, will come with a guest network port and a main network port and an internet port that goes in. Plug a switch into the main network port that will serve the devices that are your home devices, your work devices, the things that you are going to be in that scenario. And any of your smart devices, your IoT toasters, all those things, put them on the guest wired network. And then have the wireless network correspond, right? You should be able to do that fairly easy and mostly out of the box. Those should not be able to talk, at least across the guest network to the LAN in most home consumer devices. So if I was giving an uneducated user advice on how to do this, it would be to segment to guest and LAN. I get much deeper than that.
We got a question from the camera crew in the chat of what about Roku or Philips Hues? So those are two different classes of device. Your Philips Hue devices go on that IoT guest, right? What have you. Roku's an interesting one. I actually do have Rokus on my main network, and it's because I stream media across the network into said Roku. So you have to make a decision about that. I also have enough going on my network that I understand if a connection happens I don't like. If you don't have any local media streaming, stick the Roku on the guest network, and don't over throttle your guest network. But yeah, that's a great question.
I also add something. I didn't realize I had a couple things. Bob Miller popped in. So Bob Miller does get points because he answered Honeypot during the time we were asking Honeypot. So he gets his points there. And he also says he thinks Nicholas is hysterical. So we're good there. Just wanted to pop in. And then he goes on to say, what about people's baby monitors getting hijacked? He's actually referencing a real event. There was a threat actor that was actually talking to a child through this baby monitor, if I remember correctly on this story. It was horrifying, right? And this was through
multiple cases.
Yeah, it's nuts. So great, thank you, David, for popping. Oh, it was David that popped.
Just don't buy that stuff. Don't buy that stuff. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
just don't.
100%.
Do we really need it? Like, how far are you away from your baby, where the baby monitor is still relevant, yet you need internet? Like, this doesn't make sense to me.
The internet connected. I need to be able to go on a walk for 4 hours with my baby at home with my baby monitor. Right? Yeah. So David, Rob, I cut you off earlier. We were starting down.
That was actually where I was going to go with that, but that was what I was going to talk about. Not necessarily a baby monitor, but folks with pet cameras or whatever, and not necessarily knowing where the what the brand name is, one, and what it's connecting to or whatnot. We actually saw traffic going to like not necessarily malicious traffic, but it was definitely beaconing out, but to a Southeast Asian country, and we were like, what the heck is this? And the user was just like, I think that's our cat camera. I think that's what feeds it snacks. And you're like, yeah, let's dump it, because that's not okay.
And actually, I want to add one extra tip too, because you triggered me on this. My work network is one VLAN of one device at my home. So even though I've made decisions to allow certain IoT maybe to talk to other IoT and certain of my home machines to talk to certain IoT infrastructure, not my work machine. My work machine is on a separate VLAN itself, and it's the only asset on that VLAN, and it has no access, granular or otherwise, to any of the other systems in my house. And so if you are in control of your network and you are a nerd, do a little bit of work to make it to where the impact of your decisions in your own life don't impact your work life. That's the piece I would take back, is try to come up with methods to make it to where Robert never has to go, Matt, why am I seeing this weird traffic? Not me, bro. I'm only this laptop. So if it's coming from there, it's coming from right there, right? 100%. Nicholas, you also brought up one more thing that I wanted us to cover as a topic. And what about this? Now that people are working from home, you get this pop-up ad that says, you should be using a VPN. Let's talk about it. Are all VPNs created equal?
No. VPNs are they're not created equal. So here's the thing that people don't realize about VPN. They aren't like magical, like whenever you hear ads, they aren't like a magical force field or barrier that protects you.
That's what they say.
Really but what it's essentially doing is you are really just giving you're just mitigating I guess risk. So you're giving another company access to all
be
that
in the
traffic.
middle. They are absolutely being in the middle. They've chosen to be the in the middle person. So you can see after my demonstration where that might have some poignancy, right? So I just wanted to hit that point home. Continue.
Yes, so it's you're not necessarily being you're not being protected by default. It's up to the other company. They do have all those logs and data. Some may store it, some may delete it,
some may sell it.
Some may sell it. Yeah. So in itself, VPNs are not inherently safe. Like, they can be safe, but it really depends on how it's set up and how it's used. So
how much
you can't
you pay?
just download a random one off the internet. Speaking of, free VPNs that you may find on the internet, you got to consider how do they make their money? Oh, they just coincidentally like storing some data. Wonder what they do with it,
Yeah, 100%.
So,
well, let's dispel a couple things on that topic, because there's a couple counter arguments I've seen on not the VPN one, but it'll come up. But the Wi-Fi one in particular, and eventually on the VPN one, is, well, Dom, the insecure Wi-Fi with no encryption is not as big a deal as it used to be, because 80% of internet traffic is over TLS with an SSL certificate and authentication, blah, blah, blah. That's fantastic, but I promise you that at least 75% of users get the certificate warning and are like, that's annoying, and they hit continue anyway. Right? Even though that is the clearest, because back in the day we taught them to do that, because we didn't use trusted certs, right? Because they were expensive. So I just wanted the argument that TLS is the solution, or TLS, I should just say HTTPS is the solution, is true, but also in practice completely falls apart when we factor in human behavior.
Now, I give a guest a pass on this, Dom, but HTTPS is Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, and TLS is Transport Layer Security.
Technically doesn't exist.
What's that?
HTTPS.
What doesn't? Okay.
HTTPS.
No, you got to elaborate now.
So the 2-minute version of a 10-hour story is Microsoft and Netscape were battling back in the day. Netscape invented HTTPS. And when the IETF, or Internet Engineering Task Force, stepped in, Microsoft did not want it to be called HTTPS, because that's what Netscape called it. So that's how TLS was born. And now we have HTTP over TLS and everything else over TLS. So there you go.
Fair.
It is technically HTTP over TLS.
And technically right is the best kind of right, isn't it, Dom? So you succeeded. That's fair. That's a good story. I love it. All right, got off on a tangent. I also want to acknowledge that David Beers is still on the show in spirit, and he's actually said, I think, more words in chat than I've gotten out of him on the show, and I'm very happy about that. He said about the baby monitors. He said, and the other thing is that the fact that Amazon is absolutely littered with off-brand clones from overseas, like true story, and I would suspect that most of those are vulnerable to everything. And I think that goes back to speaking on the reason why that being exposed physically and visually on the same network with those IoT devices makes room for attack. And if I'm a threat actor and I've gotten into this one service and I've gotten onto this device or gained access to a device, I'm wanting to pivot into more juicy things, right? And I imagine that there's a ton. David even laughed. Good, thank you, buddy. But yeah, there's a ton of vulnerabilities that are in our world, and we buy them because they help us, right? Like I think I have 45 different motion sensors in my house now that I've done of varying different types of connectivity. They're all on that dirty network, right? They're all on that IoT dirty network. Anyways, all right, one more topic to close us out on that VPN subject. I'd like to take it a little further. Robert, you started to say something. When is a VPN actually good for you? When does this actually help in your world and in your security?
If you're going to be traveling and you're actually doing work, like doing business related work, VPNing to an office type of or an enterprise
or
SSE
Edge or any of those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's huge because then you'll have that bubble wrap like Bill was talking about last week, and we can actually be able to see and recognize that you know this is you doing your work and not a bad guy, masquerading as you trying to be doing your work.
And actually, you hit on something I hadn't expected there, because what's interesting about when you start doing encapsulation, you almost in a way recreate some of that walled garden model. What I mean by that is you recreate in its new cloud form, where I'm creating an SSE edge or a secure service edge, as we described last week with Bill, and it's this understanding that you now could actually inspect the traffic. You could start looking for patterns that show it's not Matt anymore, right? If Matt behaves this way all the time and he does these type of activities, and now all of a sudden we're seeing Matt do very strange things, maybe Matt's compromised. Maybe Matt's machine is compromised, right? And you start getting into some of those understandings of what you can do yet again, even though you don't have this office and you're not on one network. And I'll give you the fallacy of this, right? Where it still shows up that we're tactically behind. Go look at CIS. In the ones, in this asset discovery, one of them says collect DHCP logs. Yeah, this is Matt Lee. No, I told you already once. Matt Lee with Pax8. Right, I understand. Thank you. Yeah, Starbucks. I need you to send me the logs for DHCP from the 3rd Street and Main Starbucks. What do you mean no? What kind of crap is this? These things are preposterous, and we have to start finding new ways to solve what the inherent reason for collecting DHCP logs, which was find out what assets would have been approved to be on this network. That might change, and now if you start seeing your world behind a ZTNA architecture or Zero Trust Network architecture, or behind SSE or Secure Service Edge or SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, right? As you start seeing your world get all of those pieces in place, you can all recreate some of those capabilities and behaviors that you had. So that's when a VPN is a good thing. And in my mind, it's when your company's paid for it and it's something you're paying for and it's set up in the right way and it's done to actually connect you properly to your resources, right? And so those would be the things I would take. But we're a little running late, mainly due to my fire alarm shenanigans.
We're running late though, but let's back it up. Like let's break out of work for a minute, because there is value in a VPN.
That's fair.
For just you, right? So
you need to be paying
you do need to be paying. There are some reputable services out there that do a great job at this, right? I think at a bare minimum, where I would start is the first thing I do on anyone's home network is get off of ISP's DNS. So I like 1111 or Cloudflare for that. But let's talk about VPNs. There's a lot of great products out there. Like Matt said, you need to be paying for it, right? You don't need to be paying a ridiculous amount of money, but you need to be paying a fair amount of money to have, because they are selling you. They somehow need to pay for a large network that handles a lot of traffic from disparate locations. It's expensive to run one of these services.
Yep.
So just to throw a couple out there, do your own research. But NordVPN is high on my list for personal VPNs. Proton VPN, and there's a Tunnel Bear. There's a bunch of them out there. So you can, and they are valuable in that public Wi-Fi space where you are perhaps on an untrusted network for your own personal use. Just make sure the company's reputable. Make sure you've researched them, and you're gonna have to pay for it.
Yep. And I'm going to give Bob Miller some points on this because he said in the chat, VPNs are good when you have control over the source machine and destination system. Anything else creates risk. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. You definitely have an inherently more understanding of what's happening in the middle when you own both ends of it. But that said, I hope that as you watch this today, you've taken away a couple tips about working at home or working remote. Don't leave your laptop unlocked. Try to use a VPN where possible. And maybe there's one more thing to do. As my man gets on his mean mug face, let's go ahead and call it up. You can call it, Rob. What are we asking for right now? What's the last thing on our show?
We need a flag so I can hand this off to the winner.
Matt Lee, I'll take it.
Do we have that?
It's apparently Matt Lombardo. He's the winner. We're announcing it ahead of time.
Good luck typing that up.
Yes.
Copy and paste, man.
Awesome. It'll be showing up in the chat later.
We'll just going to drop it in the chat.
Yeah, we'll get it in from the chat there. Thank y'all for joining us. I want to be respectful of everybody's time that's watching. We did run a little long today. If you liked that live hack, if you thought that was valuable, please comment, please subscribe, please do all the fun stuff. And Don, why don't you close us out on what we got next week? Boys, thanks for being here, Nick and Robin. Thank you for doing an awesome Cybersecurity Awareness Month with us.
That was amazing.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much for joining us. Very excited to see who gets that belt, and I hope to have you two on the show in the future. With that in mind, that is our show for the week. We did run over, so let's get you out of here and on to your weekend. Next week, we're talking to Matt Lombardo from Electric AI about professional services. We're going to go a little bit off on a tangent next week. I'm really excited for it because obviously services is near and dear to my heart. With that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, sign up for PAX 8 Beyond. Don't forget to hit us up in the interim, and we'll see you next week.